Goldberg is back, and he's going to face Dolph Ziggler at SummerSlam this Sunday. Welcome to the channel, everybody, and welcome to your Enhancement Talent review for WWE Monday Night Raw, August 5th, 2019. Had to look at the dates. Goldberg is back. After the instant classic he put on with The Undertaker at Super Saudi Money, he is back for more. I kid, but nonetheless, Goldberg is back. He's ready to get the proverbial taste out of his mouth of the last performance he had in a WWE ring against The Undertaker, one for which he took a lot of blame for, both on himself and by everybody on the internet, for whatever that's worth. Obviously, it was a case where he essentially knocked himself out, and from there, it all went downhill. And so now, Goldberg is back. He's going to face Dolph Ziggler at the pay-per-view on Sunday. We'll get into the full segment of that as we go segment by segment in this Raw review, as we do every single week here on the channel. And Goldberg is going to use Dolph Ziggler as mouthwash. And that sounds weird, I know, but bear with me that, when you have a bad taste of something in your mouth, as Goldberg did with his last wrestling appearance, you want to get some mouthwash. You want to gargle it. You want to spit it out. And that's what Goldberg is going to do with Dolph Ziggler this Sunday at SummerSlam. He's going to ingest him into his mouth. He's going to gargle him around for a bit. And then he's going to spit him out and hit him with the spear and a jackhammer. And that'll be the end of that. I'd be interested to see if there's any betting odds on the over-under for that match as far as match time goes. And what do you figure? What do you figure a good over-under is? Like maybe 4.5 minutes? I don't know. Maybe it'll go a little more than 5 minutes, but like, come on, Dolph ain't getting no offense in that match. The best way it could even possibly go over 5 minutes is if Ziggler pulls an Owens, and just as soon as the bell rings, he just walks around the outside, and then gets back in to break the count, and then goes back outside. They could do that. That would make it over 5 minutes. But I don't see this one going long. That was the problem with the Goldberg match in the Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia, was that if they would have just done the 5-minute match, and really, like, the first part of that match was very good, because, it played to Goldberg's strengths, it played to Undertaker's strengths at this point in his career, but then they felt the need to extend it longer than it had any business going, and that's when things just went off the rails. But, Goldberg is going to be in there with someone like Ziggler, who will, if there's one thing Ziggler's good at, it's selling his ass off and making a big guy like Goldberg look good. And, it's I don't love it in the sense of just the moral of it, that, just because Goldberg, we want to give him one last good memory, and there's no telling if this would actually be his last match or if he would continue from there. But it's just it's a weird sort of thing to get into when you talk about Goldberg at 50-ish years old. I don't have his Wikipedia page in front of me right now, so I'm not sure exactly what his age is, but he doesn't have a lot of miles left, no matter what the plan is for him going forward. So I hope that the plan is to, if he is going to be around, to build him up and hopefully get him to put somebody over in the end. You know, someone like a Bray Wyatt with his new character. And, you know, he's had the whole thing. We'll get into it this week, attacking another legend. Maybe Goldberg can go on a bit of a run. Maybe he can take out Ziggler. Maybe he has one other marquee match. And then you get Bray Wyatt. And that elevates Bray Wyatt by beating Goldberg. And you just keep... The biggest thing is that you have to give back what you put in with anybody. Anybody like a Goldberg and like a Brock Lesnar, anybody that has that sort of credibility and that sort of aura about them, the goal and the payoff for anything with them should be, okay, how are we going to use this to create a new star? And you know, it's where they've really messed up with Lesnar, because if you look back, the only real clean loss, and as far as clean as a sheet, no doubt loss that Lesnar's had since beating The Undertaker at WrestleMania was to Goldberg at the 2016 Survivor Series. And you know, that I can't objectively say that that was a bad decision, because they went on, they had a really engaging storyline going into that year's WrestleMania, and they had a kick-ass match. The best 5.5 minute match you'll ever see in your life. And I'm sure that that match was instrumental in the interest in WrestleMania that year, because, you know, the Brock Lesnar redeeming storyline, overcoming his past demons of Goldberg from the Survivor Series match, and then going all along with that up until the WrestleMania match, and you had I believe Goldberg eliminated Lesnar in the Rumble that year too, so it just kept building like this thing that, you know, it's like a mental block, you know, like Brock just can't beat Goldberg. And so you built that up, and then you paid it off, which was good. But the problem with it was, and where, like I said, I can't say that it was a bad decision. But what I can say is that it didn't create new. Lesnar was already a star. He was already the top guy, essentially, in WWE. So, you know, you beat him once to build to the redemption story, and he gets his win back, and maybe that notches him up a little bit higher than what he was. Maybe it adds to Lesnar a little bit, but it didn't create new. And that's what I think we need to focus on going forward with guys like Goldberg and Lesnar. And I'm sure that's something that Paul Heyman is big on, is that, you know, you have to eventually pay things off the right way and try to build guys into higher tiers and higher star power and credibility levels. And, you know, as far as who it is, I mean, it's subjective who you could choose. I mean, I feel like every prediction I've made for the last few months has been to get Bray Wyatt into that upper tier, which I think should be a focus, because what you have with Bray is something so unique, but it's also so fragile and can also be derailed very quickly if handled incorrectly, especially being that we've already had a past of Bray Wyatt of doing the opposite, of going down the rungs. And, you know, like when I talk about Samoa Joe, I say that it's Bray Wyatt syndrome, that, you know, talk the big talk, but never actually back up those words. And so now they've created a whole new persona for Bray. They've turned and they've turned it into a completely different story, and that we're all willing to forget everything in the past with Bray. And I think that is something that should be focused on. But enough about that. We'll get into more of the Goldberg and Ziggler stuff in the main event of this Raw show. But now it is time to go seg by seg on this Raw. We started off with a new intro. We haven't had an intro with music and whatnot in the video package in however long it's been. But I'm convinced that they put this together just for the way that they started the show. And also, just to note it, because I note these things, Elias was in the Raw video package, even though he's on SmackDown. But other than that, I didn't see any SmackDown guys on the video thing. So, nitpick, but oh well. So, they did this for the first time in however long, the opening intro. Only for Samoa Joe to interrupt it. And he says he's interrupting our regular scheduled programming. So I'm kind of convinced that they just wanted to start the video thing so Joe could do that, but that's neither here nor there. Samoa Joe, not the Samoan name Joe, Samoa Joe, is on top of the announcer's table, and he's going on a rant. He's yelling at Michael Cole, he's yelling at Corey Graves, and he's talking about how everyone's blaming him for Roman Reigns' attack, his mystery murder assaulter person / forklift driver person on SmackDown this past Tuesday. And Joe goes on a rant about how he didn't attack Roman Reigns. And the one funny part was he pointed out how many cameras were on this scene of a crime, and none of them saw him. He demands that Roman comes out and apologize to him. For what, I'm not sure. I guess he said because his fan base is insinuating it was him. Like, I don't know. Either way, he's incensed about this apology. And then Becky Lynch's entrance music interrupts Joe. And that just ends it. Like, I'm not sure how much I've talked about this, but WWE gets in like this crutch of like, all right, how do we end this segment? Okay, well we'll just play someone else's music, and then everyone that was involved in the last segment, they'll just fade away. We'll cut to commercial, and we'll come back, and they'll be gone. It just feels like such a weird conclusion. Like, Joe is incensed, and he's talking about like putting Raw hostage until he gets an apology from Roman Reigns, and then Becky Lynch's music hits, and they never showed Joe on camera again. So he's just like, oh well, I guess I'll wait until later. I mean, I guess like I don't have a better way to end the segment, but still, it's just a weird transition, I guess. But it's hard to do correctly, I guess. I mean, I don't know. It just irks me sometimes that just ends the segment and everyone that was involved in the previous segment is just gone. But Becky Lynch entering would set up for our tag match. We have Becky Lynch and Charlotte teaming together against Trish Stratus and Natalya. And when I first heard this, I thought the teams were ass backwards. It would have made so much more sense for Becky to team with Trish. Now, I get that, like, the face-heel dynamic is going to be messed up either way, because I don't think Natalya is necessarily a heel, but she's not. I mean, I guess by the end of this, you probably could consider her the heel, but at this point, like, I didn't really consider her a heel in the storyline. But when anyone who's opposed to Becky Lynch, I feel like is the heel in some sense. So Becky and Charlotte teaming together. Obviously, this was you could see from a mile away where this was going to go. And that's why the teams ultimately were the way they were. So, Natty and Becky trade holds early on in the match to foreshadow what is now their submission match for this Sunday at SummerSlam. A SummerSlam submission match. It features a Hart, and it's in Canada. I wonder if Earl Hebner is available for that one, but I guess he's not, considering he's with AEW. But maybe they can pull off some sort of deal. If they do I can't imagine there's any way they would do like the 15th revisit of the screw job. Right? Right. I mean, that would just be a terrible idea. So, Natty and Becky, they trade holds and submissions going into the early part of this match to foreshadow that submission match. Charlotte eventually tags herself in on Becky as Becky is trying to get Natalya in the disarmor. And then Charlotte takes over the offense on Natalya. And when I say she takes over the offense, she takes over the offense for what felt like the next 10 minutes. And it was just nothing but Charlotte beating up on Natalya. And you have Trish just standing on the apron the whole time. And, maybe occasionally Charlotte might say something to Trish. But other than that, Charlotte is just beating down on Natalya. Natalya gets no offense in the whole time Charlotte's in the ring, essentially. So, Charlotte later pretends to tag Becky, but, pulls it away. The tension there keeps boiling. And after several minutes of Charlotte beating on Natalya, Becky tags herself in. And Charlotte, being the poor sport she is, knocks down Becky and bows out of the match. She goes up the ramp, and she continues to watch from there. And, of course, Becky, instead of focusing on Natalya, she looks out in the ring over the ropes and is just like, you. And so that distraction allows Natalya to put Becky in the sharpshooter. But ultimately, Becky would get to the ropes. Natalya refuses to break the hold, and that leads to a DQ finish. And Natalya would cinch in on the sharpshooter and try to injure Becky going into this match. Trish Stratus comes in. She pushes Natalya off of Becky. And, well, she doesn't push her off. She gets her to release the hold. Natty, upset about it, pushes over Trish. Natty bounces, and Trish and Becky are left in the ring. So Trish did not even get in the ring on this match. So I'm not sure what the point of putting this together was, other than to just fill time to keep wheels spinning going into both of those matches. But it was just unoriginal, and it's just another one of those creative crutches. Well, we have two feuds. We're not sure what to do with them. Well, let's just put them both in a tag team match together, and we'll have a DQ finish, so that way neither of them have to lose any momentum going into the pay-per-view. It's just, I didn't care for it. Trish didn't even get in the ring, which I'm fine with Trish not getting in the ring, but she shouldn't have had a match. if she wasn't going to get in the ring. Like, I'm all for saving seeing Trish for the pay-per-view. I think that's smart. But I don't see the point of putting her in a match to just stand there. We had Rey Mysterio versus Andrade. This off the back of the Gauntlet match last week, where Andrade eliminated Rey Mysterio and then tore apart his mask. And, of course, the backstory to this goes back to SmackDown a few months before WrestleMania. Rey and Andrade, they get together. They just have that awesome first singles match. They meet each other again in tag matches, have more singles matches on SmackDown, and allegedly it was supposed to lead to possibly a WrestleMania match, but it never happened. And so now we get Rey versus Andrade again, and this was as good as all the matches they did previously on SmackDown. There were so many spots, I can't even recount them all. So many near falls. We had the Canadian Destroyer, which, everyone will pop for. There was Code Red by Mysterio. There was the Penguin Slide into a power bomb into the barricade on the outside. Only spots that always, it irks me when anyone does this stupid spot and it used to be Alberto Del Rio's finisher, where you'd essentially, the person giving the move is on the top rope, and then the person taking the move is tongue down below them in a Tree of Woe position. Except instead of being in a Tree of Woe, just hanging upside down, they're holding onto the ropes, propping themselves up, so that Andrade, in this case, can hit Mysterio with a double foot stomp to the chest. And, it just leads to the question, why didn't you just let go of the ropes? No one's forcing you to hold those ropes. And there's certain, the move can be done if, you do it in an instance where you're in the Tree of Woe and you try to pull yourself up, and then as you're pulling yourself up, then that move gets hit, and then that way it at least kind of makes sense. But and the way they do it here, it just makes it look too phony. Which, I know, wrestling being phony in 2019, who could have possibly foreseen this? But nonetheless, still a stupid spot. So, other than that, tons of big moves all over the place. Andrade he does that thing where he fakes the big boot and then comes in with the back elbow, and it just looked like he absolutely rocked Rey in the head. That looked frightening, but it looked good. But I hope Rey's head is okay. So the finish comes with Andrade trying to remove the mask from Rey again, which I thought for sure was going to lead to Rey ending up getting the win because Andrade was too distracted by trying to pull the mask off of Rey and embarrass him that would ultimately cost him. But in this case, he tries to get the mask off Rey. The ref backs him up, and Rey, stumbling into the ropes, is walked into Zelina Vega, who hangs him up on the ropes. And then in comes Andrade with a hammerlock DDT for the pinfall victory over Rey Mysterio. 2 weeks in a row, Andrade beats Rey Mysterio. And so, SummerSlam is this Sunday. And not like it's unlike WWE to add matches at the last second. But I'm not sure that there's room for a Rey versus Andrade match. And even if they did add it, I just feel like it would get lost. I feel like you could put it on a different pay-per-view and have it be more of a marquee match. if that is the ultimate goal. I could see them doing a mask versus hair match. It's been a while since they've done any stipulation like that. Only problem with that is that I feel like it's just anytime Rey Mysterio is in a mask versus whatever match, I mean, Rey has to win, right? I mean, at this point in Rey's career, you're not just going to make him wrestle without a mask. It would just be. I'm not all for that concept, but I mean, I wouldn't complain about it either. It would be fine to do, but I feel like it just makes the outcome too predictable, which not always a bad thing, but I also feel like Andrade should be the one coming out of this on top and trying to elevate him rather than Mysterio, who doesn't have. He's at the latter portion of his career, and he should be being used to get a guy like Andrade more over. And maybe this won't lead to a pay-per-view match at all. Maybe it'll just be TV, and that'll be it. And Andrade gets these couple of wins over Mysterio, and maybe he can go into something bigger. We have Mike and Maria. Mike and Maria Kanellis. After Maria became the first ever pregnant champion, that being the 24/7 champion. And so the whole gimmick is that no one can hurt her because she's pregnant. And it's not the Attitude era anymore, where we can't just push someone onto the apron and force a miscarriage. No, let's not revisit those days. So Mike and Maria, they are at an OB/GYN appointment, the gynecologist for Maria. And the whole thing they do is that they do the whole thing, they wait, they get into the doctor's office, and then as Maria is seated, Mike quote unquote pins her, essentially just like fooling Maria into it. And then the doctor ends up being a referee in disguise who counts the 3, and Mike wins back the 24/7 championship from Maria. Which it begs the question, I mean, if Mike was just going to do this, why did he lay down for Maria to begin with? He could have just said no. But I guess Mike found his balls somewhere. And he finally pinned his wife. Unlike Drake Maverick, he has still not pinned his wife. There was no Drake Maverick on this show. That was surprising. Like, I was expecting the whole conclusion to this to be more like R-Truth and Drake Maverick have to put their differences aside to find a way to get the title off of Maria. But they went with the Mike route instead. And so Mike wins the championship. He leaves the doctor's office. He's in shock. He's like, I can't believe this worked. And then this was pure comedy. And in the worst possible way. It was funny because of how absolutely stupid it was. Which, is the whole concept of this 24/7 title. So, Mike goes, he gets out of the office, and he's back in the waiting room, but R-Truth is disguised in the waiting room as a pregnant woman. And he gets up, and he says, "My water broke," and then pulls into his skirt or whatever, pulls out a baby doll, throws it into the air towards Mike. And Mike, seeing all of this, gets distracted and catches the baby doll which allows R-Truth to roll up Mike. The Doctor Ref comes back in and counts the 3, and R-Truth reclaims his 24/7 championship. I believe they said this was his 11th title win. He'll pass Ric Flair's record in no time. I don't think it counts the same though. But I mean, this was mindless fun. I mean, that's what the 24/7 title is to me. I don't feel like anything they can do with that title will add to like my overall enjoyment or critique of a Raw show, but I do think that it's just mindless fun. And there's nothing wrong with some mindless fun when you sprinkle it in between, good storylines and whatnot. But not always the case. And then instead of it just being mindless fun to have a break from the good stuff, it sometimes becomes that you're looking forward to the mindless fun more. So, either way, just regular 24/7 stuff. Another day at the office for those guys. Brock Lesnar is out next. Heyman comes in with him, obviously. Does his whole Heyman shtick. He kicks to a video package of Lesnar's beatdown of Seth Rollins last week. Absolutely destroyed this man within an inch of his life. And Heyman says he learned earlier today that Rollins is in the building. And to that he says that Rollins has more balls than brains. And so how does Rollins respond to this? His music interrupts, and he limps down to the ring with a steel chair. Paul Heyman says Rollins has more balls than brains. And then Rollins says, "Oh yeah, I'll show you, Heyman." Limps down to the ring to get pulverized again. I mean, what was the point of this? What was Seth thinking? Why? I feel like it would have been more beneficial to just leave Rollins off this week, but I also get what they were trying to accomplish. And it's a tall task to get the fans back behind Seth Rollins, at least to the point that they were at one point. But either way, Rollins comes out. He tries to get a shot in with the chair on Lesnar, but Lesnar goes right after the ribs. He assaults Rollins with the very chair that Rollins brought into this ring. Lesnar used it to beat the hell out of him. He only hits one F5, I think, and he spares Seth Rollins from himself. So Lesnar leaves, and when they come back from commercial, Rollins is still in the ring. He's groveling on the ground in pain, but he gets a microphone, and he starts to this is a hard thing to do, especially if you're a baby face that is not over. It does not already have the appropriate sympathy from the fans. So Rollins, he's he's not crying per se, but he's crying with words, questioning if this is all worth it, and this is all he could ever do, but all it ends up happening is that he fights for his dream, and all it ever ends up in is him in deep pain. And he questions, is all this worth it? And he says, yes, it is. And then he just somberly says, I'm going to beat Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. I guarantee it. Now, the biggest thing, another big thing in babyface booking, is that you have to deliver on guarantees. Like all the time. Back in the Attitude Era, you would have The Rock say, I guarantee I'm gonna win the title this Sunday or whatever. And you have to deliver on those. Unless the plan is to turn Rollins heel. In which case you could use this to do the absolute opposite of that. You could have him guarantee he's going to beat Lesnar, and when he just can't do it, he snaps. It leads to him snapping, turning heel, and taking it out on someone else that doesn't deserve it, and they turn him heel that way. I'm not sure if that's the route they're going for. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of really top babyface guys on Raw, so I could see them leaving him as a face. Although I guess you have Roman Reigns, who's just on both shows, so what difference does it make? But either way, we'll see which way that goes. I'm expecting Lesnar to retain this Sunday, but we will see what they do with Rollins going through all of that. There was Kurt Angle, because they're in Pittsburgh, so Kurt Angle has to be there, and he has a backstage segment with the Street Profits, and this was a very funny segment to me, just because the Street Profits, the Street Marks, the Street Narrators, whatever you want to call them, they come over to Angle, and they kind of insinuate that they want to drink with him, but then they pull out the cooler and it has a carton of milk. And so the funny line though was when Angle declined the drink because he promised his wife he wasn't going to do anything crazy tonight. Yes, Kurt Angle having milk past 10 p.m. is definitely considered crazy. That's far too late for that. But Street Profits, they convince him into it, but then in comes Drew McIntyre, who interrupts this segment, reminding Kurtz about what happened the last time they were in a ring together, he says, when Drew absolutely dismantled him and beat him with his own move, making Kurt Angle submit to the ankle lock. Yeah, remember that time? That was right after that match was when and I'm sure many other people thought, man, Drew McIntyre is going to be the top guy. This is going to catapult him into the main event scene. He's going to have a big program with Lesnar or someone, and it's going to just take him straight to the top. Not exactly. So Drew tells Angle to make sure he calls his match, because Kurt Angle is scheduled to be the guest referee for Cedric Alexander versus Drew McIntyre later on in the night. And Drew just tells Angle, you better call the match down the middle. They did a nice Harley Race video package after this. Definitely a RIP to Mr. Race, a legend in the wrestling business, and really one of the big figures from the NWA era, and unfortunate of his passing, but it's always nice to see those video packages that they do after, because especially for the people that they might watch now and they don't know who Harley Race is, and it just lets even them appreciate who Harley Race was. So that was nice. After this, that we get Cedric Alexander versus Drew McIntyre. The match never starts because Drew blindsides Cedric as Alexander is coming down to the ring. They take each other out. They battle on the outside with Angle trying to get them in the ring. And then, as both of them are down, the lights start to gradually go out. We get the screeching noise and all the ballyhoo that goes into the cinematics in this Bray Wyatt entrance. And Bray appears in the ring, and now, for the second time, he puts the mandible claw onto Kurt Angle. And that, of course, people theorize that, he might only be using the mandible claw that one time because it was a Mick Foley that he did it to. I hoped at the time that he continued to use it because I thought it was just a good thing to have for that character. I mean, the similarities between Mankind and Bray Wyatt's character now are there. So just steal it. And he puts Angle down with the mandible claw. And, it's not like he's going to stop using the other finisher. Like, he can still use both. He can use Sister Abigail and the mandible claw. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's good to have more than one thing to go to. So, Bray, again, taking out another legend of the past. One at the Raw reunion show where he took out Mick Foley, and then Kurt Angle on this show, and again with the mandible claw. And, I can totally see Bray as this generation's Mankind. And if they put the storytelling into it, and that was the big thing with Mankind, is that Mick Foley was so good at just telling a story. And Bray Wyatt, I think, shares a lot of those same qualities. And, the big thing with Mankind, and if they recreate this with Bray, it would be awesome. Although it would be hard to, because what I'm talking about is the interviews, the vignettes that they did for Mankind, where, they had when I say like it's an interview, it was with Jim Ross, but it's one of those more like formal sort of interviews where it's a sit down interview that was filmed at like a separate location, that kind of thing. Like it's presented as more of an in-depth interview rather than, a backstage interview. And, those promos that aired for weeks throughout Raw with Mankind being interviewed by JR were what really got Mankind over. And, originally Mankind was supposed to be a heel, but, the people started to sympathize with him so much because of the story that, he was telling that. And, there's so many layers to that Mankind story. And just in those promos alone, that he didn't want to be Mankind. He always wanted to be Shawn Michaels. And, the going into being bullied as a kid, and, just so much good stuff. I'll have to rewatch those again now that I'm thinking of them. But I'd recommend anyone go out of their way to watch those, because I feel like it's some of the best promo work in wrestling history in those promos. I believe they're from '97. I'm sure you can find them on YouTube. But, if you can take any sort of essence of that, and, it's tough because I don't know who you can put in the role of JR in that, because there's only one JR. And, you can try to make Corey Graves into that, but it wouldn't be the same per se. But if they did it with someone, I think you could do Corey Graves and have that same sort of in-depth interview. So, maybe one day they'll do that with Bray, but I still enjoy the unknown with the Bray Wyatt character and the split personality of the Firefly Funhouse, Bray Wyatt and the Fiend. And, that might make it more difficult to think of doing like an interview like that because, what do you do? Do you interview the Fiend or are you interviewing the Mr. Rogers Bray Wyatt? This was something else. We had a scheduled match. Gallows and Anderson, who are the Raw Tag Team Champions, were set to face the New Day of Big E and Xavier Woods, the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So, you would think Tag Team Champions versus Tag Team Champions, that's a big deal. There must be some sort of hype to that match, right? No, it was just thrown there. And not only was it just thrown there, it was only thrown there to set up what they were going to do after the match, because the match went 10 seconds and it ended in a disqualification when AJ Styles interfered. I get that where they wanted to go, but why didn't you just go there to begin with? Why do you have to dilute and just diminish the value of seeing a champion versus champion match? And so, of course, Kofi wasn't there. I think they said on commentary, like, while New Day was still being beaten down by all three of these guys, Kofi's not in Pittsburgh tonight. He'll be on SmackDown tomorrow, but not Raw. So, Big E and Woods were just left there 3-on-2. Out comes Ricochet, of course, AJ Styles' SummerSlam opponent for the United States title. Ricochet comes in for the save, and they clear the ring, and that sets up a mixed tag, or not a mixed tag, a six-man tag after the commercial. And so now it just feels like, and they have gotten away from not doing wrestling in commercials at all, because they did some, it seemed like, in the Rey Mysterio versus Andrade match and in other instances, but it still seems like they don't want to do it as much as they possibly can. And so then it makes it feel like they just do stuff like this to avoid doing that. And it diminished the purpose of just a champion versus champion match. Like, that should be a big deal, and it's just out there on Raw. Like, that's been the whole gimmick of Survivor Series, the pay-per-view, was that they do the 5-man tag matches, but then they also do a singles champion versus a singles champion from the other brand, or this tag champions versus that tag champions. Like, I don't know, just feels like it's diminished that by doing this convoluted way just to get to the 6-man tag, when you could have just done the 6-man tag to begin with. If that was the end results, I mean, why not? So, you get the 6-man tag, and the finish of this match was so strange. Gallows takes out Ricochet on the outside. He throws him into the barricade. And Gallows isn't the legal man at this point. So after he takes out Ricochet, Gallows stands up on the apron where you would stand in a tag team match. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just standing on the apron. And then the ref just comes over and, like, berates him, like Gallows is trying to get into the ring. But Gallows is just standing there. And so off this distraction, AJ trips Woods, I believe, from the outside of the ring. And then Anderson hits a DDT, tags in Gallows. They hit the Magic Killer. They pin Woods for the win. Yeah, I mean, as far as like the build, because neither of the tag team championships are on the SummerSlam card, I don't believe. So this was really here to try to build AJ and Ricochet. And I didn't really get much of anything from that. I just felt like this was just there. The finish was dumb. The setup to this match was too convoluted and diminished the value of a champion versus champion match. So that was a thumbs down altogether segment. Samoa Joe is back, and he is holding this show. Excuse me. He is holding this show. He's holding my lungs hostage, as you know I'm struggling to continue getting words out. But he's holding this show, as in Monday Night Raw, hostage until Roman Reigns comes out and apologizes. I still don't know what for. He wants Roman Reigns to apologize for other people blaming Samoa Joe for his attack. Makes sense. It makes perfect sense if you don't think about it. That should be WWE's new slogan. It makes sense if you don't think about it. So Joe promises to sit in the chair. He grabs the chair from ringside, and it was brought to my attention when he did this, because he goes out to the timekeeper's area, and he goes to grab a chair, and as the timekeepers and everything move out of the way, the ring announcer and whatnot, you have the steel folding chairs there, but then you have that nice cushiony office chair right next to it. I don't know why Joe wouldn't get the office chair and sit in a more comfortable chair. Instead, he preferred the steel folding chair. That is a decision that I'm not sure about. But small details aside, Joe promises to hold the show hostage until Roman Reigns apologizes. Crowd were so into this that they were chanting for CM Punk. Joe is told by some crew member that Roman Reigns is arriving. So Joe, instead of waiting, he goes to the parking lot to meet Roman. And Roman gets out of his car as he's driving into the parking lot. He parks his car, he gets out of the car, and he's confronted by Joe. They're jaw-jacking back and forth. But out of nowhere, Roman Reigns sees coming at him a vehicle flying straight at him. So he dives back into his car, and the car that's flying at him hits the car, and then I think right after this they cut to commercial. But then they come back and they show during the commercial footage. And right after that, Samoa Joe is looking on like, what the hell did I just see? And the car, it pulls out and speeds off. And so now Samoa Joe, who was just trying to confront this man and force him to apologize to him, was like, oh, shit. That motherfucker got hit with a car. I better help him. And so Joe insists on Roman to stay down and wait for medics to arrive as he's hollering for people to help. I don't know, like, I can get the argument that Samoa Joe's character shouldn't be feeling sympathy for Roman after all they've been through. But the fucker got hit with a car. I mean, at the same time, this is the same Samoa Joe that has invaded people's homes and done all sorts of other awful things. Never actually wins any matches off of those things, and most of the things he does are just vague threats. But nonetheless, Joe says a lot of very messed up things. He talks about people's families and everything else. So than this soft side of Joe coming out. It's just strange. I'm not really for or against it. Like, I can see the reality of the situation of even if you're a dick and you see someone get hit by a car, I would think even a dick would still help that person. So I can get that. But it also feeds into the situation that, it could have been a setup by Joe because, you could have planned this to seemingly clear Joe's name, but, he actually had someone else in cahoots with it and they set it all up. You could lead it to that. Triple H was someone who came on the scene during this, which made me think it was Triple H. It's not going to be Triple H, but that's what it made me think. And as is being reported right now, it's supposed to be Daniel Bryan, but I'm just hoping that they don't reveal this tomorrow and then have a match at SummerSlam. I feel like this has more miles on it. Even though, as goofy as it is, the scaffolding out of nowhere collapsing on Roman last week on SmackDown with the forklift, whatever, and then someone attempting vehicular homicide against him. And, in the end, we're going to settle it with a wrestling match. That's always when you get into the goofy stuff, but like I said, WWE, it makes sense if you don't think about it. And in this case, it's like in a good way. Like, we shouldn't think that far. Like, and that's why I hate when they actually do angles where the heel brings in like police officers and all that jazz and quote unquote police officers. They're always indie wrestlers, quite clearly. But I feel like it should just exist in its own separate universe where there are no cops. That's just like this whole other world. Just play it off like that, at least. Because if you have cops in one situation, but then not when someone tried to kill a man, then, you get into the inconsistency of it. Either way, please don't reveal this tomorrow, and please don't immediately have the match at SummerSlam. If it is Daniel Bryan, there's a good story to tell there, and you can milk this out for more than just a 1 week build to a pay-per-view match. With the history between Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns dating all the way back to the Royal Rumble in Philly that year, everybody thought Daniel Bryan was the guy. They went with Roman. And that, it started the whole thing, like, he's not our guy. Daniel Bryan's our guy. And, you can play off that history. We had a Fatal 4-Way women's tag title match. Apparently, it was an elimination match, which I did not get the memo on. I thought that Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville won the titles, but in fact, they eliminated the Iconics right away. So they guaranteed us that there would be new tag team champions. And that would leave Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville versus Asuka and Kairi Sane, the Kabuki Warriors, and Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. And so after that, it just came down to both the heel teams are trying to not be involved in the match. They're tagging in and out so that they don't get eliminated. Cross eventually takes out Asuka on the outside. I forgot to mention Asuka eliminated Mandy with the Asuka lock. Then that eliminates Sonya and Mandy. So then it comes down to the Kabuki Warriors versus Bliss and Cross. The finish comes with Cross taking out Asuka on the outside and getting her in the apron and throwing forearms at her. And before that, Cross had pushed Kairi Sane off the top rope when Kairi Sane was going for the insane elbow. So after this, Bliss hits the biggest phantom punch you've ever seen, and then puts Kairi Sane down, hits the Twisted Bliss off the top rope, and gets the pinfall win over Kairi Sane. And Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss are the women's tag team champions. And I just have to wonder, and for one, this match went far too long, and it wasn't all that good because, I mean, Asuka is great, Sonya Deville is very good, Nikki Cross is good, everyone else in the match you can take or leave. But even at this point, like, it was just too long. And, it wasn't quite as bad as that fatal 4-way elimination match they did with Alexa Bliss and Naomi and Natalya and Carmella. It wasn't quite that bad and drawn out, but it was similar. And, even like Asuka, who I think as an overall wrestler is one of the best. I think she's the best female wrestler in the WWE, and I think she's among the best, including the men. But it's just clear that whether it's an issue of that she just doesn't care anymore because, she's been fucked over for so long that what's the point? Or that it's just she doesn't have the chance to show what she's capable of because she doesn't have enough worthy adversaries. It's just a whole different argument because we've seen what Asuka can do against Charlotte and Becky. She even beat Becky one-on-one at the Royal Rumble to win the SmackDown Women's title. And since then, after she lost the title to Charlotte, she's done absolutely nothing. Even though she still has the last laugh over Becky, who is a champion right now. Asuka is nowhere to be seen. And now we have Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross as the tag team champions. I guess I should get into that. I hate it. I mean, Alexa Bliss, like, it seems like the end thing to... it's one of those either love or hate things. And I think Alexa is more talented than people might give her credit for, but she's also not at the same level as someone like Asuka, which, there's nothing wrong with that. Not many people are at that level, but Alexa's constantly being pushed into, for the past several years, it's just been that she's been the women's champion. She's been the SmackDown Women's Champion. She's been the Raw Women's Champion. She goes back to SmackDown, back to Raw, whatever. And, she's always been on top of that on either division. And it's never held up because I don't think that is the role that she should be in. She shouldn't be at the top of the division. So now you put her in the tag division with Nikki Cross. You suck away the life of Nikki Cross's character. You destroy every fiber that was the Nikki Cross we knew in NXT and just killed it. And then you're left with Alexa Bliss and Alexa Bliss's fangirl as the tag team champions. I'm not into it. And I don't know where they go from here because that was all 4 of the teams that were that they have in the women's tag team division. And the thing is, like, I would have been equally unenthused if Asuka and Kairi Sane won. Because it just would have been unwarranted because they've done all of nothing. So if they just won the tag team titles out of nowhere, I still would have been critical about it because it would have been impossible to care about what could have been a cool moment. But there's been no build to this women's tag team titles. There's been no build to the women's tag team division. The Iconics have had the titles since WrestleMania. I feel like this is like the first actual defense of the titles they've actually had. And unless you want to include being counted out and facing Enhancement Talent, this was the first real one. And that leads us to the final segment of the show. Miz and Dolph Ziggler are set for a contract signing. And, by the fact that this was in the main event, by the fact of the Meltzer reports going into this, you knew where this was going to go. So, Miz and Ziggler contract signing, I guess Shawn Michaels is supposed to, I don't know if he's like a mediator or if he was just supposed to be there, but he's there. And, Miz comes out, he introduces Michaels. Ziggler comes out, they do the same promo they've done the last few weeks. And Miz says his big point at the end. And even though it was predictable, I still love the way they set this up. Because Miz says, I can't wait to get my hands on you next Monday at Raw. And so Ziggler, confused at this, we're signing a match for SummerSlam. Miz explains that Dolph didn't read the contract. He didn't read the fine print. Miz says he has plenty of future SummerSlam moments ahead of him, but Dolph's opponent may not have many left. And, he steps aside. He looks at Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels gets up. Him and Ziggler go eye to eye with each other. And then Shawn gets on the mic. He says, it's not me. I bet Dolph wishes his opponent for this Sunday was Shawn Michaels. But alas, Goldberg's music hits. They didn't do the whole elaborate entrance. He just came out. He comes to the ring. As he enters the ring, Dolph is begging him on for a fight, but then as soon as he enters the ring, Dolph exits. Goldberg signs his name on the contract and simply says, Dolph Ziggler, guess what, son? You're next. And the bit of a chaotic ending, especially now that they don't have the overrun anymore, and they have to end right at 11, which no complaints from me about. I don't need to see another 15 minutes, another 20 minutes. But as Ziggler is irate, he's pacing up and down the ramp, and he turns around straight into a Shawn Michaels super kick, getting back at Ziggler for when Ziggler hit Michaels with the super kick a few weeks ago. And so Goldberg, as I mentioned earlier, shall use Dolph Ziggler as mouthwash. He shall get the taste out of his mouth of that last performance. And where Goldberg goes from there is yet to be seen. It's reported that Paul Heyman is big on the idea of using Goldberg going forward. And, just like I said at the top of the show, I just hope that they have a good, concise plan for what they want to do with him, who he's going to beat, and who ultimately is going to get the rub at the end by being the one that can beat Goldberg. Because otherwise, it's just wasted time. But that is all I'm going to do today. Man, I can feel my voice just like fading from this, but always fun to do. Overall, to just put a bow on it, I thought that this was at best an average Raw with a couple of cool moments sprinkled in. I thought the Rey and Andrade match was the best piece of pro wrestling you'll find anywhere in WWE this week. So that was a positive. Other than that, I liked the way they set up the Goldberg thing. I was a fan of how they presented it, and just Goldberg's presence. Just that's the thing, is that he still holds that presence, and I don't feel like you can ever take that away. That aura about him is still there, and it's just up to them to use it properly. Other than that, I thought there was a lot of stuff I could have gone without. The six-man tag stuff with the OC, as they're called, and New Day and Ricochet, didn't really care for. The Trish Stratus and Charlotte, the Trish Stratus and Natty versus Charlotte and Becky, didn't do anything. Trish wasn't in the match. You know, there was some mindless fun with the 24/7 stuff, but Drake Maverick wasn't there. And I can only assume that was not because he was consummating his marriage. Because, they're not going to do that until he gets the 24/7 title back. But that is where I will leave this. We will be back for SmackDown tomorrow. Until then, take care.